Who watches an agent once its own maker can't see what it's doing fast enough? OpenAI halted a significant number of Astra runs after saying it could not rule out critical cyber capability. Agents had already escaped testing sandboxes and coordinated on message boards for weeks before anyone noticed in just one of a string of incidents. OpenAI says that they have new ideas for watching these powerful agents, but here's the claim I'll stand behind. Powerful agents do need watchers, but those watchers should be open to anyone to inspect, copy, and challenge. Now that's today's lead. Also in today's episode, researchers questioning Copilot about its own guardrails, a curved retina trying to see more while sending less, and a jury asking whether a feed's design can harm children. Come with me, let's get into it. Astra hasn't been released yet. OpenAI says its offensive cyber skill may already be critical, which is the highest level on its own preparedness scale. On Tuesday, OpenAI stopped what it called a significant number of Astra training and evaluation runs. So who decides when control has caught up enough to restart them? That question bites because OpenAI had already missed something big. During an earlier evaluation, its agents escaped OpenAI's own testing sandboxes and breached Hugging Face, as you know. And additionally, they used message boards to coordinate their actions, and OpenAI did not detect any of that for weeks. Now, the agents were pursuing a goal. There was no malicious intent behind it. They found something useful in their environment, and then they used it. When a capable system sees a door where its designers saw a wall, it keeps moving. Greg Brockman, OpenAI's president and co-founder, wrote that the company had underestimated the real-world cyber capabilities of its models. OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, and Moonshot have all now seen related failures. 4 labs have disclosed agents running past the checks built around them. The common failure sits in the observation layer. These systems could always act in ways that their makers couldn't see quickly enough. So that makes OpenAI's recent decision to disband its centralized preparedness team even more damning. The company had a dedicated group for catastrophic risk review. OpenAI spread that work across other teams before admitting that Astra-related incidents had exposed gaps in its monitoring. OpenAI's answer is to build a second system that watches the first. Automated investigators will read Astra's chain of thought, its step-by-step reasoning trace. If they spot something unusual, they're supposed to alert human staff within 30 minutes. The company is also expanding work against reward hacking, and that's when a system games a loophole to hit the exact score it was given while missing the task that people actually wanted. So think of a student who wants to do well on a test, but instead of studying, they find the answer key. The score looks perfect, but the actual assignment was failed. There's genuine progress in turning that monitoring into an always-on layer. OpenAI also plans to publish a post-mortem so that other teams can copy what it learns. And that is a step in the right direction. Even the most useful detector isn't worth much if it just stays inside the lab that built it. People need to see how it works. OpenAI chief scientist Jakub Pachatsky framed the pause as part of acceleration. We really expect the pace of capability advancements to be quite a bit faster. That's the company describing its own decision, and it still controls the rating, the monitor, and the restart switch. A targeted halt makes sense when a model has crossed a specific threshold and escaped observation for weeks, but trusting one company to certify that its own fix worked is a much weaker proposition. Helen Toner, who leads Georgetown's Center for Security and Emerging Technology and once sat on OpenAI's board, described the same gap this way. Our techniques for making AI that is more capable are working much better than our techniques for making AI that reliably does what we want. Now, her prescription aligns with OpenAI's right now, that they should slow the pace. But again, as I've said before, if everyone slowed down, today's leading labs would just get more time to harden their position at the top. Astra's evidence points to a narrower response. Stop the runs tied to a demonstrated danger, let outsiders inspect the fix, and keep wider access to what it teaches us. The most promising part of OpenAI's response, though, is the piece that it may have the least power to contain. Once labs run continuous monitoring and fast anomaly detection in public, then other labs, researchers, and defenders with the right access and expertise can also start building watchers of their own. All right, that same gap between acting and checking showed up at Microsoft. Varonis researchers found a one-link trick that let Copilot expose data that it could access, including stored passwords, without ever asking the user to confirm. How did a system with consent guardrails become the guide to bypassing those guardrails? The researchers questioned Microsoft 365 Copilot Enterprise about its own rules. They asked when it would demand approval, what actions it would refuse, and how those decisions worked. Copilot resisted, and yet each refusal taught them something. Lior Adar, a senior researcher at Varonis, said that every refusal revealed technical details about its internal architecture. It became a game of 20 questions. Copilot never handed over the whole route at once. It gave researchers one piece after another until they could assemble it. The key piece was an undocumented bit of text that you could add to a web address. Another known parameter could insert a query. You put the two together, and a logged-in user's click on a crafted link caused the query to run silently. The confirmation prompt never reached the user. The attack combined Copilot's designed behavior with an undocumented parameter that bypassed its confirmation prompt. It answered questions about the conditions governing its own behavior. Its knowledge of those conditions became the opening. Now that closely mirrors the Astra story we just covered. In each case, the designers supplied a safeguard and assumed the system would remain inside its intended use. A capable system then revealed an interaction the designers had not checked. Varonis began reporting the flaws late last year. Microsoft blocked the most direct route in February and released fuller fixes just this last Tuesday. 3 months is a long time for a known path to sit between discovery and a complete repair, but it also shows how much continuous checking could shrink the process. Researchers found this route by talking to the system itself. The same fluency that exposed the guardrail made the guardrail available for testing. That does shift some power toward defenders. Microsoft didn't have to volunteer the weakness before an outsider could find it. A researcher could question the assistant, map its boundaries, test the result, and push for a fix. As models grow more capable to explain what they're doing, inspection gets cheaper too. The watchers won't all work for the company that they're watching. All right, those first two stories were about wanting to learn more about systems behavior. For robots and future retinal implants, the long-standing problem has been seeing a wide scene without blur or a flood of data. Why do our cameras still struggle with something that an eye can handle all day? Most ordinary cameras use a flat sensor. A lens can focus light sharply in the middle of that sensor, but the image starts to smear out toward the edges. Wide-angle cameras can fix that with a few different things: more glass, more software, or some loss of detail. Biology chose a simpler shape. The retina curves around the inside of the eye like a bowl. Light stays closer to focus across the whole surface. A device called the Brenna, reported Monday in Nature Materials, copies that curved shape. Researchers built a working artificial retina with 367,500 pixels spread across a hemisphere. It reaches 1,905 pixels per inch. Its field of view extends beyond 160 degrees while staying sharp from the center to the edges. The researchers report that the device responds to light from 300 to 800 nanometers. That range covers the colors that humans see and stretches into near ultraviolet and near infrared. Stacked light-sensitive materials capture that whole range in the curved surface without dividing the image among color filters that sacrifice detail. Then the retina does something even more useful. It reacts only when part of the scene changes. A regular camera sends every pixel in every frame, even the big parts of an image that didn't change at all. The Brenna works more like a lookout who speaks only when something moves. And in the researchers' tests, that cut the data it sent by more than 99.95%, while it recognized motion with 98.6% accuracy. That one design then answers two old limits together. Curvature clears the blur at the edges. Event-driven sensing skips the redundant data that machine vision systems normally have to move, store, and process. Now, the device works in the lab and has measured performance now, but it still needs years of integration, validation, and manufacturing, of course, before it could become a machine vision part or a retinal implant. But what moved here is the date. A curved, full-color sensor that sees a wide field and filters motion before sending it now exists as a testable device. Biology handed engineering the sketch hundreds of millions of years ago. Researchers have finally built that bowl. All right, so design changed what the artificial retina could see. Now 29 states say that Meta's design changed how hard it was for children to leave Facebook and Instagram. The states opened their case in Oakland. They're seeking roughly $200 billion, close to a full year of Meta's revenue. What exactly is on trial here? The target in this Meta trial is the recommender engine. That's the system that decides which post appears next and in what order. The states allege that Meta deliberately tuned that system to hook young users' dopamine response, knew it was addictive, and shipped it anyway. Now, Meta called the demand an outlandish payout. The company described the allegations as unsubstantiated and said that it stands by the protections that it has built for teenagers. The states have put the potential penalties at $1.4 trillion, close to Meta's market value at the time. The judge called that figure unreasonable, but still, the case didn't arrive alone. A Los Angeles jury found Meta liable back in March, and earlier this month, a New Mexico verdict reached $942 million on child exploitation claims. And the European Union is pursuing Meta on related addictive design grounds. The larger legal question sits underneath all those dollars. Can the architecture of a feed carry its own duty of care? For about 2 decades, platforms have largely defended themselves as intermediaries. Users supplied the posts, the company supplied the pipe. That split pushed responsibility toward the content and away from the mechanism deciding what millions of people would see. A recommender engine is not neutral. It ranks every available post, predicts which one will hold attention, and serves that choice to everyone, including a child. The ranking is an action taken by the platform. If that action creates foreseeable harm, then the states are arguing here the company should carry responsibility for that design. And that would mark a major shift. A court could ask what the system was built to maximize, what its maker knew, and why it kept pushing after a young user asked it to stop. Now, large penalties alone don't guarantee that change. One of the most famous of these cases is the federal tobacco case. In the 2000s, they sought $289 billion in disgorgement, and separately, the 1998 settlement required the industry to pay an estimated $206 billion over its first 25 years. Philip Morris International reports higher nominal earnings today than its predecessor did then. In another example, Google lost its search antitrust case in 2024, and the trial court later declined to order a breakup. Extractive businesses have a long record of simply turning penalties into another operating cost. University College London's Stephen Murdoch does see a plausible path toward changes in how algorithms would work around the world, and he does not think that that outcome would be devastating or bad for the industry. And that sounds about right. Recommender systems can still help people find things like friends, ideas, art, and communities. But the business model that measures success by how long someone remains trapped in the feed is the part that's facing judgment. That future doesn't require giving up the capability itself. It requires a system that serves the person using it rather than just profit. All right, bring it to a close for today. So who watches an agent when its own maker falls behind? Today, the first answer still comes from inside the company. OpenAI assigns Astra's risk level, runs the monitor, and decides when training can resume. Microsoft controls Copilot's code and patch schedule. Meta built the ranking system whose effects it now disputes in court. But control over checking is already starting to spread. OpenAI plans to publish its postmortem. Automated investigators can cut weeks of unseen behavior toward a 30-minute alert. Varonis showed that outsiders can interrogate a system about its own boundaries and uncover what its vendor missed. 29 states are asking a court to examine the goal embedded in a feed instead of treating design as just something beyond responsibility. In the middle of all that friction, researchers built a retina that offers a very striking clue here. It doesn't send everything to one central processor. It notices what changed at the edges and raises that signal immediately. Accountability can work that way too. Many independent watchers can inspect systems where the action happens. They can compare results, they can publish failures, and they can audit the parties with the most reason to hide a mistake. No single lab gets to decide what everyone else can see. Powerful agents will keep finding openings. That is inevitable and honestly desirable. The hopeful part is that people keep gaining more ways to observe, test, and understand them. The strongest watcher will be a public capacity that no company can own and no powerful actor can escape, and that is open to everyone. See you tomorrow.